Yes. Alrighty. Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the appropriations public hearing regarding proposed FY 24-25 budget for GGA, General Government A, and GGB, General Government B agencies. And we are ready to start. So let's see. Can we promote some people in? Janine Davis. Randy Collins.
Is Steve Lance here? Oh, come right up. There we go.
Steve Lance and Jess Zagarino. Is Jess here too?
Yeah.
Oh, you decided to come in person. Okay, very good. The floor is yours. 3 minutes.
3 minutes, yep. Turn the microphone on.
How about this?
There you go.
There you go.
Well, good evening again, chairs, ranking members, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Stephen Lance, and I'm from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And I'm joined by my good friend,
Jess Zagarino, Policy Counsel of the ACLU of Connecticut.
We're requesting $1.95 million for the Secretary of the State so they can implement the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of Connecticut. This bill honors the legacy of John Lewis by enacting comprehensive protections for the right to vote. It builds on the Federal Voting Rights Act and state laws in New York and elsewhere. It will make Connecticut a national leader on the voting rights. Two parts of the bill have budget impacts. First, a program modeled on the federal VRA that will allow the Secretary to review certain voting changes before they go into effect to ensure that they don't discriminatorily harm voters of color. Second, a statewide public database of election information for transparency and as an essential bedrock for the law's administration. The estimated budget impact of these two provisions is less than $2 million. Now that's a fraction of the overall budget. It's about 0.004%. But this funding is an investment in democracy that can have profound returns. Strong voting rights protections like these have been shown to decrease racial turnout disparities, to increase diversity in elected office, make government more accountable, and make policy more equitable with concrete benefits. For example, academics have found that the federal VRA led to higher wages for Black workers, even that it helped reduce infant mortality in Black communities. That's powerful. This bill can make our democracy more equal. It can make our society more just. And $1.95 million is a small price to pay for that.
We encourage you to fund the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of Connecticut. And for similar reasons, because of interlocking systems of oppression, voters who are less likely to vote on election day, people with little job flexibility, without transportation, without childcare, and disabled people are also more likely to be voters of color. Any early voting plan must at the very least allow for 2 full weeks of early voting with at least 1 weekend, extended morning and evening hours, with voting places distributed equitably, accessible by pedestrians and public transit with disability access. We therefore urge this subcommittee to fully fund equitable early voting alongside the CTVRA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Have a nice night. You are number one and number 1.5.
Thank you.
Up next is Janine Davis. She's online. Janine.
Well, hello. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening. My name is Janine Davis, and I'm the co-director of Bridgeport Generation Now. We are a grassroots member-based organization in Bridgeport. Bridgeport Generation Now and Bridgeport Generation Now Votes, which is our affiliate organization. We are really on a mission to protect our democracy in Bridgeport and increase civic engagement. I'm here to testify in support of the Connecticut Voting Rights Act and early voting this evening, and with a few provisions. Like Stephen, I'm testifying for the 1.9 million to be added to the budget. We know that the Connecticut Voting Rights Act would have a significant impact on the voters in Bridgeport. In particular, in 2019, our organization helped voters in Bridgeport to sue campaign and government officials after evidence was found that there was voter intimidation and manipulation in the 2019 mayoral election. Because we did not have full standing in that election, we were not able to have sufficient an outcome to overturn that election, although the evidence was there. And Judge Stevens said at the time that the evidence was so egregious that the state of Connecticut needed to change the laws and to protect Bridgeport voters. Also, I know I've only got a couple more minutes, I think, in terms of early voting, also very much in support of early voting. We know that in Bridgeport, people work lots of different hours, they have very busy schedules, and early voting would help to expand the electorate, I believe. It would help people to have access to getting to the polls. Not everyone can visit the polls on one particular day. So we, fully supported getting that referendum passed last year, and are also asking for at least 3 weeks of early voting to be implemented, which includes nights, evening hours, early morning hours, and at least 2 weekends. And I'll just stop there, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davis. Appreciate your comments. Up next is Amy Cunningham. Is Amy here? After that is Cory Lee Santana. Cory Lee Santana here. The floor is yours. 3 minutes. Got to push that button. There you go.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairwoman Austin and Chairwoman Walker and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Cory Lee Santana. I am the Policy and Program Associate with the Connecticut Project Action Fund. The Connecticut Project Action Fund mobilizes with our neighbors and advocates for policies that improve systems and advance real-world outcomes towards just, thriving, and optimistic Connecticut, where income, race, geography, and other circumstances no longer predetermine opportunity. To advance that mission, we supported the Yes to the Freedom to Vote Early in ballot initiative campaign, which you will undoubtedly know passed with a 60% approval margin ahead of all other statewide elections. It's now your turn as members of the Appropriations Committee to make early voting count, make it accessible, and make it fair. While we understand that there may be other budgetary considerations to a thrive and just and optimistic Connecticut this session, we respectfully ask this body to appropriate the necessary funding to implement early voting in fiscal year 24 and to sustain it in fiscal year 25 and thereafter. Making early voting count means to appropriate the resources in this upcoming year so that Connecticut can start some degree of early voting in 2023. Making early voting accessible means ensuring that implementation is practical and responsive to the needs of seniors, working people, and disabled citizens for whom early voting is a significant new right. That means including weekdays, mornings, nights, multiple weekends, and an early voting window. Mindful that the national average of early voting is 23 days, we view the proposed 14 days in House Bill 5004 as a minimum threshold for practical accessibility. Most importantly for you, as members of the Appropriations Committee, making it fair means adequate funding to pay election officials, educate voters, and run operations in every municipality, including small towns in big cities. Practical access to this constitutional right cannot depend on the resources and attention of individual towns, particularly when systemic inequities of Connecticut mean predictability, more challenging voting experiences outside of Connecticut's wealthy suburbs. Early in-person voting is a tool to positively change that landscape. Today, you will hear many testifying for early voting as a top priority. The Connecticut Project stands in solidarity with that message and urges you to ensure that Connecticut study habits don't interfere with the voters' directive to fund early voting. Remember, make it accessible, make it fair, and make it count.
Thank you very much. Madam Administrator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have in the waiting room, we have a phone number. I'm going to ask, give that person permission to speak and ask that they identify themselves. It's 203-507-6863. If you could give us your name, please.
Hi, my name is Jewel White.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Up next is Randy Collins.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Randy Collins, Advocacy Manager with Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Just here to offer some quick comments on behalf of our towns and cities on the governor's proposed budget. We understand it's the first step in a long process. The governor's budget largely maintains municipal aid at levels that were appropriated in the fiscal year 21-22 budget. With the non-educational aid being increased, I think by about $22 million when we look through the numbers. This is basically flat funding. I mean, after some years of potential negatives, flat funding is okay, but as municipalities are looking at significant budgetary increases across the board, labor, healthcare, insurance, utility costs, this is really going to put a lot of pressure on our local leaders to either make hard decisions in terms of reducing critical services or raising the property tax. And obviously with the over-reliance on that property tax, as we're doing a lot, and it's going to impede economic development, more importantly as well. We're seeing obviously a strong push across the legislature to talk about and address affordable housing. Increasing the property taxes just simply is going to exacerbate the problem and make housing continually be unaffordable for many residents. Also want to just flag concerns that we have with the potential changes in how municipal aid is funded, with the creation of the municipal revenue sharing fund. I think we just have we have questions that we can work through to fully understand how that process would work. But as of right now, it's just some questions in terms of, is there more of a priority being placed on the revenue diversion, that 0.05 sales tax diversion? And if more emphasis placed on that than the appropriation side, does that eliminate the possibility for, will there be stuff left for supplemental municipal revenue sharing that we provide municipalities $70 million this year? And in some conversations with OPM, I think there's some question over on tiered pilot, whether the floor, when we enacted the tiered pilot in 2021, that there was a floor put in so that no municipalities received less. And there were some questions that we had with OPM, whether that would be ongoing or was that just for that budget biennium when we enacted it. So again, looking forward to working with the committee. I'm sure we'll be back before you as we go more into the education side, but just wanted to remain focused on the general government portion tonight. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice night. Up next is Raymond Jackson. Is Raymond Jackson here? Yeah.
Madam Chair, he just came into the room. So if you could call the next speaker and we'll name him and then promote him.
Deb Polen. Is Deb Polen here? Oh, Deb, you're here.
Good evening. It's so nice to be here in person. For the record, my name is Deb Polen. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Association for Community Action, and we're the association that works with Connecticut's community action agencies. And they serve people across the state and every city and town and provide services to about 200,000 low-income people every year. I'm here today to talk about baby bonds. And I want to start by thanking you all for your commitment to baby bonds and passing that legislation 2 years ago, making Connecticut the very first state to do that, and demonstrating a commitment to invest in our children that are born into poverty in our state. You You show that investment every year by passing budgets that prioritize education, that provide nutrition and housing for these kids. And the goal is that they're going to have a better life as they're growing up, and then they're going to have a career, and they're going to be able to raise a family here in Connecticut. That's always the goal. And it is, it's a good goal, and we're getting there. But the problem is that, as we all know, wealth is generational. And there are some roadblocks for people to build their own wealth unless they're able to get a little bit of a head start. And sometimes that comes from their family. And sometimes for other people, unfortunately, that little boost isn't available. And that is the point of baby bonds, to invest about $3,200 in a kid when they're born, and to know that when they become an adult and they're ready to buy a house in Connecticut or open a business here in our state or go for higher education or training in a trade, that they have about $11,000 that there's just no other way that they could obtain that will help them over that hump that they just don't have access to otherwise. This is the idea behind baby bonds. I know there's been some controversy behind baby bonds. It is an expensive program, but I think it's a worthy investment, and it will help us to close that wealth gap that unfortunately Connecticut is also known for having. We just have a couple of suggestions as well, and the suggestions are in my testimony. I'll summarize them briefly. One would be to refer the families to community action agencies when the kids are born, so that we can be sure that they're on all the other programs that they might benefit from, like WIC or SNAP or housing assistance, et cetera. The second would be to collaborate with schools and local nonprofits to make sure that the kids and families are getting financial education throughout their lives, instead of just when they're ready to take the baby bond money out. The third is to ensure that there are periodic statements provided to the children as they age, and that generates enthusiasm and forward thinking about what they'll be doing once they're aging up into taking that money out. And finally, to train people in the community on how to advise people to access the baby bonds. Happy to work with you as you move forward this session, understanding that you're looking at other options for funding this program, and just want to again thank you for your commitment to this program and helping people raise up out of poverty in Connecticut.
Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
Thanks, you too.
Going back to Raymond Jackson, Mr. Jackson, floor is yours.
Dear Representative Walker, Senator Alston, and members of the Appropriation Committee, my name is Raymond Jackson, and I am a lifelong resident of New Haven. I served as the Democratic Town Committee co-chair for Ward 21 and am a member of New Haven Rising and a community activist. When I was 12, I was very interested in drawing and architect. In fact, that year I won a district competition for designing the new Jackie Robinson Middle School building here in New Haven. But soon my life changed. My sister was involved in a violent altercation on a school bus, and I ended up having to switch from school to school. The first school I was transferred to was St. Martin de Porres, then to Troop Middle School. From there, things went downhill fast. Even though I had two great parents, once you get into certain groups, it appears in certain social situations, you no longer see school as the necessity that it is. I struggled to pay attention to my teachers or to stay interested in classes that didn't seem important to what was going through and I was going through in life. Back then, my thinking wasn't like it is now. By the time I turned 18, I was arguing back and rebelling against school and my parents. I did serious time in prison. I wasn't that 12-year-old kid who wanted to go to school for architecture. Having a program like the baby bonds would have helped to keep me on track. I would have had something to motivate me to keep me striving for my dreams. I am 64 years old now, and I can't imagine what sort of inspiration I would have taken back then from knowing that I had the resources to go to school and study design and of architecture. Now I have 4 children of my own. One of my daughters has 10 children. If each of her kids was enrolled in the baby bonds program, they would have a goal to work towards. If the program gets funded, I and other community activists could use it to push the youth in our community to keep trying in school and to fight for their futures. It is hard to follow your dreams when you have no reason to believe that you will ever have the resources to pursue them. My excitement about the baby bonds program, the reason I am appearing to testify in front of you today. I urge you to fund this program and give our kids a reason to keep their motivation going, because it is easy to be distracted once you're deferred by something that's out of your control, and that makes it hard to trust in the system. It is so easy for people to make promises that they don't keep.
So thank you, Mr. Jackson. We appreciate your testimony. Your story is compelling. Thank you.
Yes.
Have a nice night.
All right.
Up next is Eva Bermuda Zimmerman. Latoya Agnew. Latoya,
Hello.
thank you. You got 3 minutes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. Dear Representative Walker, Senator Olston, and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Latoya Agnew. I am a resident of New Haven and a member of New Haven Rising. I am testifying today on the governor's proposed biannual budget. I urge the committee to include funding for the Connecticut baby bonds and your final legislation. When I turned 18 and went to college, that was the first time I realized I was poor. My grandparents had to pay out of pocket for me to go to school. I saw how much they sacrificed in order for me to have a better life. Having a program like the baby bonds would have taken the burden off of them as well as off of me. It was a struggle for me to make it during college. My grandparents and I took out student loans, but it still wasn't enough. At one point, I even tried to sign up for food stamps in order to provide myself with groceries, but I got denied. I wasn't the only one who was struggling or having difficulties. My friends were also struggling. Some of them had to balance working full-time in addition to studying in order to afford food and rent. After all of that, I still didn't graduate college. Having a program like the baby bonds would give kids more of a choice when it comes to their futures. College is not for everyone. This program would give them a chance to put money down on a house or towards other dreams that don't require a college degree. Many young people see their parents struggle and feel obligated to help them, or because their parents struggle, they aren't able to help their kids as much as they would like to. This program will take the strain off of families in those situations. And for that reason, I urge you to fund the baby bonds program. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Nice job.
Yeah.
Up next is David Radcliffe. Mr. Radcliffe, the floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm David Radcliffe from Hamden. I work with Dr. Derek Hamilton, founding director of the New Schools Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy. Dr. Hamilton is the economist, researcher, and architect of the Baby Bond Wealth Building Initiative. I'm testifying today on the governor's proposed biennial budget. I urge the committee to include funding for Connecticut baby bonds. You know, every week in Connecticut, about 300 babies are born into poverty. That's almost half of all babies born in our state, and every one of Connecticut's 169 towns and cities. It's clear that our current set of programs, policies, and resources are not helping close our state's considerable and growing wealth gap, one of the worst in America. While our income and wealth gaps create a drag on households and our state's economy, we don't have to accept things as they are. Baby bonds is a research-based, creative, transformational investment that provides startup capital for life for our many young people who are not, despite their best efforts, full participants in our economy. Baby bonds provides resources for young people to build wealth and a greater ability to weather financial shocks. Baby bonds supports young people to be healthier and have greater freedom of choice over a lifetime. Baby bonds helps unleash ingenuity, human capacity, energy, and civic engagement that poverty otherwise forces to the sideline. And beyond the longer-term wealth-building benefits of a baby bond investment, other possible near-term benefits include improved maternal health, including reduced anxiety and depression, increased family sense of hope and expectations for the future, better financial decisions today, greater likelihood to pursue and complete post-secondary education, and importantly, increased trust in government. In 2021, with your leadership, Connecticut became the first state in the country to pass baby bond legislation, serving as inspiration for other places. In closing, baby bonds is a down payment for tomorrow, along with other today investments in early care and education, child tax credit, earned income tax credit, school funding, affordable housing, to name a few. Baby bonds can help create a more equitable and fair economy by providing access to wealth for the many of our neighbors who are locked out of the American dream. With your continued support, we must follow through on our promise to Connecticut families and ensure funding in this budget for baby bonds. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice night. Up next is Claudine Wilkins Chambers.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
we have been attempting to promote Ms. Wilkins Chambers, and she has not accepted the promotion. So I'm going to try again, and if she would please accept the promotion, then she can testify. So I would go on to the next person, please, Madam Chair.
Ms. Wilkins Chambers, you need to accept the promotion in order to speak. Thank you. Next is Kylie Goslin. Kylie Goslin here. There you go. Floor is yours, 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you for having me here tonight, Representative Walker, Senator Austin, and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee here to testify on the budget. As you know, the Partnership for Strong Communities, of which I'm the executive director, is a statewide organization dedicated to expanding housing opportunity here in Connecticut. And we also support the Home Connecticut campaign, which is a coalition of partners around affordable housing. And that includes tenants advocates and developers, planners, and a whole host of others. One of their proposals this year is something we'd like to respectfully request be added to the budget for OPM. And that's the creation of a $5 million pilot to support additional inspection and enforcement capacity for housing code inspections in towns that have proactive licensing or inspection regimes. These types of regimes take the onus off of tenants to report violations. So in most towns, the common practice is that tenants must complain about housing code violations in order to then have an inspection. So imagine yourself as a single working mom, for example, living in a unit that has health code conditions, perhaps mold, water damage, and infestation, as many of our older housing stock rental units do here in Connecticut. And as I experienced heading up Hartford's development office for many years and meeting many of these moms and seeing many of these units, the choice they have here is untenable. Either allow their child to continue to experience and themselves experience the health conditions associated with those poor housing code violations, or to report the housing code violation and risk retaliation by your landlord and perhaps losing that roof over your head. And right now, with Connecticut having a rental vacancy rate of 2%, that puts tenants, especially low-income tenants, in a very difficult position. We cannot and should not put the burden of monitoring the safety of our state's rental stock on tenants, especially when so many of them are in this position of being low income with skyrocketing rents. Some cities like New Haven and Hartford have taken the responsible step of moving to proactive licensing or inspection regimes, which require the city to inspect units every 3 to 5 years. And in some cases, landlords are required to obtain a license or a certificate of apartment occupancy through this process in order to be able to rent their unit and ensure that it is safe to do so. This requested funding would help support those towns that do move to a proactive regime, and also incentivize other municipalities to take a look at how they currently perform housing code inspections and consider moving to a proactive regime themselves. These resources could be used for hiring additional inspectors, as well as dealing with the legal enforcement issues on the back end. With that, I'll close my remarks for tonight and thank you for your time.
Before you go, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yes, we're trying to find the issue, and where did you see this in the agencies that we were hearing tonight?
It would be under OPM is what we're proposing.
Okay.
Yep. It should be in my submitted written testimony. There's more
Because
information.
we had an elderly gentleman come in and he wanted to talk on this issue, and I
Oh,
said,
great.
this issue is not on tonight, so, and he hadn't signed up anyways, but,
Okay.
so he went home, and I really feel bad now.
He'll be back.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
hopefully I conveyed the importance of the issue
Okay,
on his
thank you.
behalf. I'm happy to answer questions if there are none. I will.
Thank
Let
you.
me see. Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, up next is, we're going to go back to number 20, Claudine Wilkins Chambers. Ma'am, the floor is yours, 3 minutes. Gotta unmute yourself. Claudine?
Okay, hello,
There you go.
hello,
Hi.
am I on?
Floor is yours.
Hi.
3 minutes.
Good evening to the Appropriations Committee and the representatives. My name is Claudine Wilkins Chambers. I live in New Haven. I'm a member of AFSCME Council for Executive Board. I was president for the union for 16 years. I'm also a member of New Haven Rising. And I'm testifying tonight in support of the baby bond bill because I think it would save a lot of children and families. I have worked in the New Haven school system for many, many years as a paraprofessional. And at times when my daughter was at Penn State, I had to work 3 jobs. I had to make the tuition happen, and I did. And there are still paras of today that work 2 or more jobs. Most of them work at least 2 jobs because of our low pay. If we are going to get out of poverty and help the other people get out of poverty, we're going to have this baby bond bill back in place. And I hope it's in the budget someplace. That's why I'm testifying tonight. I live in Newhallville, which at one point had the highest rate of homeowners. Now it has the lowest rate of homeowners, and that saddens me. There's a difference in the side of the ward that I live on and the other side over the hill on Prospect Street. The life expectancy is, there's an 11-year span difference. We have to do better because our children deserve better. And if we had this baby bond some years ago, there would have been more children, Black and brown children that have gone to college and have lived on to have a better life and become homeowners and invest in the community they grew up in. So this bill is vital to the community. And since we were the first state to develop this bill, I thought we ought to see it through unto the very end, which should be no end, in my opinion, to help the children and families in Connecticut. So I urge the governor to please support this bill because it's needed very much. The children are our future, and if they don't have a good foundation, they will not have a future. They're supposed to carry on, but if the foundation is weakened, they cannot. It's impossible. So I urge the governor to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Claudine. It's Tony. Thank you for your testifying.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Up next is Jewel McKeever.
Hi, dear Representative Walker, Senator Ostensley, and members of the Appropriation Committee. I'm actually Jewel McKeever White. I'm a member of New Haven Rising. I'm testifying today on the governor's proposed biennial project. I urge the committee to include funding for Connecticut baby bonds in your final legislation. I'm a divorced mother of 3 sons. I have 5 nephews. I've been a past recipient of government assistance when my sons were very young, and believe it's a great idea to give citizens assistance to climb up from their poverty with programs like baby bonds to help stabilize their futures with education and housing options. I hope my sons will make me a grandmother one day. All are employed, but if they were to have children, it would drastically impact their living expenses. I would have loved to have had an option like this when I was growing up and when my kids were growing up. I would not have to now live paycheck to paycheck if I had that option. I appreciate this opportunity to express my concerns on the baby bonds proposal, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Up next is Edith Presley.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Edith Presley, and I am the president of Stanford Cradle to Career. We are a collective impact organization that works tirelessly to collectively align community resources to ensure that all youth succeed in education, career, and life. Because successful children lead to a vibrant, thriving community. Due to this ambitious call to action, we passionately support the Connecticut Baby Bond Initiative. Thank you for passing this into law in 2021. This awesome initiative is so innovative that just yesterday, Senator Cory Booker and Congresswoman Ayanna Presley announced federal legislation for the potential national implementation of the work that we've done here in Connecticut. I'm honored to be a resident of such a trailblazing state. We have collectively decided to shift systemic resources to allow our families to level up. For me, this is a very personal story. I had the benefit of graduating from West Hill High School here in Stanford in 1997. Out of my hundreds of classmates, I only know one Black or brown classmate that is a homeowner in our great city. Fast forward to adulthood, our town unfortunately has lost 20% of our African-American population in the last 10 years. 1 in 5 of Black folks have moved away. Imagine the impact Connecticut Baby Bond has on preserving communities, ensuring all our students have access to the return on their investment. Today, we have the opportunity to infuse hope, financial literacy, and quite frankly, the opportunity to actively plan for a financial future before the systems of predatory credit practices, student loan debt, and forced life choices due to low wages take full effect. In the words of one of our foremost founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin teaches us, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. I urge you to continue the great investment into the future of our Connecticut families. Thank you, and please fully fund the Connecticut Baby Bond Initiative.
Thank you very much. Up next is John Wooten. Is John Wooten here? Up next is Brittany Mabry Niblack. Brittany? We can't hear you. Try signing back on, try unmuting again. Now speak. See if we can hear you. We can't hear you. Do you want to sign off and sign back on again? Okay. Madam Administrator, she's going to sign off and come back on again. Up next is Patricia Rossi. Yep, she's here. She's right there. She's here.
I'm looking over there.
No, she's right there. Go ahead.
Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Patricia Rossi, and I am the Advocacy Vice President for the League of Women Voters of Connecticut. The League of Women Voters of Connecticut is a nonpartisan statewide organization that seeks to promote active citizenship and to build confidence in elections and government through effective public policy. Thank you for letting me testify on three.
Keep going.
Okay. Three different issues. I'd like to talk about early voting to support what my fellow activists have said about how important it is. One thing that I'd like to emphasize about that is that providing early voting is going to be very challenging, and it's going to be complex across 169 towns and municipalities. I've heard people who should know better say, it's going to be easy. We're just going to open town hall for, a day or two more. It won't be that big a deal. Well, maybe for the 70 towns that have only one polling place, it might be relatively simple, but even for them, it's going to be challenging. But for the 99 towns and cities who have many polling places and complex situations in terms of having people have access to town hall, I'm thinking of New Haven where I live. 200 Orange Street is not an easy place to get to. So we're going to have polling places that are accessible in other places as well. It is vital that the state fund all aspects of this expansion so that access to the ballot is equitable from town to town, and implementing a useful and fair plan does not become an unfunded mandate. So there must be sufficient funds to enable towns to hire and train the necessary personnel, provide the necessary voting locations, and safely secure ballots through Election Day. The next issue I want to talk about is the Connecticut Voting Rights Act. The League of Women Voters of Connecticut mourns the evisceration of the 1965 Voting Rights Act at the federal level. To protect Connecticut voters, we support the passage and funding of the Connecticut Voting Rights Act, which will allow Connecticut to join New York, Virginia, Oregon, Washington, and California in protecting the right to vote and promoting an equal, inclusive democracy for all. The costs associated with the Voting Rights Act are minor. The benefits are great. And lastly, I want to mention something that is not your job in appropriations, but it is a money issue. So I wanted to mention it, that reforms to the election process in Connecticut will only be hampered by old, unreliable machines. The state urgently needs to bond for $25 million to purchase new tabulators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for coming. Up next, we're going to go back to Brittany. Brittany Mabry Neblock.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, we
Can
got
you
you.
hear me?
Very good. Floor is yours.
Dear Representative Walker, Senator Olston, and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Brittany Mabry Neblock. I am a resident of New Haven, Connecticut, and a member of Unite Here Local 34. I am testifying today on the governor proposed biennial budget. I urge the committee to include funding for Connecticut baby bonds in your final legislation. I did what I had to do growing up. I knew my mother couldn't afford to save money for me. When I was 18 years old, I already had my first child and was taking out loans and working in order to go to school. I would stack all of my classes back to back on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then work full days the rest of the week while my kids were in daycare. We lived with my mom until I graduated when I was 21. When I graduated, I could only find work and get paid almost $18 an hour, even with my degree. However, I was eventually able to get a union job at Yale through New Haven Works. And now I make more money than I have ever had. And I'm going back to school currently to get my MBA. The baby bond program will have made it easier for me to get a start in my life. Many children in New Haven are born into similar circumstances like I was. While $11,000 wouldn't have paid the bulk of my college, it would have definitely offset some costs and made it easier for me to get by. I could have used that money to invest in a home for me and my children, or even saved it for them.
I believe that the baby bond program will help youth who are in similar situations as I was. They will feel more empowered to make better choices in their teen years, knowing that they have the funds to go to school or invest if they want. They might feel inspired to maintain a good GPA to get into a good school or to make sure their licenses so that way they can drive to and from job training programs. By funding the baby bond program, we can make sure that families have the money and knowledge they need to break generational curses and cycles of poverty on our Black and Brown communities will be better off. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Have a nice night. Up next is Eva Bermuda Zimmerman.
Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Eva Bermuda Zimmerman, here representing CSCA, SCIU, Local 2001, a union that represents over 25,000 workers throughout the state of Connecticut. Tonight, I'm here in support of baby bonds, as well as the additional funds for the child advocate. CSCA, in addition to having thousands of state employee workers and municipal workers, also focuses on childcare and bus drivers. A lot of these families really depend on the resources of the Office of Child Advocate, making sure that they're advocating for the families that not only they care for and work for, but also their own families. Oftentimes, these voices are forgotten and don't have enough advocacy within the legislature and state politics. So we're imploring you to make sure that they're not left out of the process. I'm going to keep it brief because we do have other appropriations hearings on specific committees and also different commissions that also assist these workers. But it's important to keep them in mind when you're focusing on appropriations and funding that can help families and children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva. Up next is Adam Waters. Adam.
Yeah, thanks so much. Representative Walker, Senator Austin, members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Adam Waters. I'm a resident of New Haven and a member of Local 33, the union representing graduate workers at Yale University. And I'm testifying today on the governor's proposed biennial budget. I urge the committee to include funding for Connecticut baby bonds in your final legislation. So I'm from Florida originally and am a proud beneficiary of a baby bond. I realize what you may be thinking, and no, Florida does not have a baby bonds program. Instead, my baby bond came in the form of intergenerational wealth. That is to say, it came from my parents, and I received this baby bond purely because I was fortunate enough to be born to two practicing physicians who had accumulated their own financial safety net. My family's affluence affected every aspect of my life growing up. It meant high quality school supplies, the best extracurricular activities, and enriching summer camps and programs. It also meant that I was able to attend a private four-year college out of state without having to take out exorbitant student loans, something that was not true for many of my peers. Once I graduated college, I was able to pursue my interests in political advocacy without having to worry about paying off student debt. I was able to take a lower paying job because I didn't have to pay off student loans. And then I was able to imagine enrolling in a PhD program here in Connecticut and foregoing at least 6 more years of significant income. It's safe to say that I would not be here, a PhD candidate in history at Yale University, had I not benefited from my earliest days from my family's wealth, from the baby bond that they gave me. I believe that every young person in Connecticut, my adopted home state, should have the same kinds of opportunities that I had. That is what is fair and what is just. We need to take seriously how impactful wealth inequality is in our communities and in our state. And we need to take real steps to close the wealth gap and address its roots in systemic classism and racism. I once again urge you to fund the CT Baby Bonds program as a meaningful step in the direction toward a more equitable Connecticut. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a nice night. Up next is Garth Harris. Garth Harris. I don't know. Next is Callie Heilman. Callie Heilman. Next is Isadora Milanez. Isadora Milanez. Next is Samantha Villalanti. Samantha,
Samantha needs to accept the panelist promotions.
Samantha, if you could accept the panelist.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. Thank you, Representative Walker and Senator Alston and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Samantha Villalanti. I'm here to testify tonight on the governor's proposed biennial budget on baby bonds. I'm also a resident of West Haven. I strongly am urging the committee to include funding for the CT baby bonds in your final legislation. This is a real life opinion. This can be life-changing for income eligible families. Due to eligibility requirements, I would have been eligible for this program had it been in existence when both of my children were born in 2006 and 2007. Both of my babies were born on Husky. We had great medical care, but I was in such an economic position that I qualified at that time for that benefit. Had we had something like this available to us now, my 16 and 17-year-olds would have access to educational funds that I'm still lacking on my own due to hard economic times and being the sole breadwinner of my 3-person household. I'm a single mom raising 2 kids on my own. And we all know that educational costs are at an all-time high. While inflation is rising and wages are stagnant. For us, the possibility of my kids going to college is almost unattainable, and it's becoming that way for most working class families. I do have a great job, a union job at Yale University that has great benefits and a higher paying wage. Even with this, as a single mom, of 2 teenagers and the sole contributor to my household, paying for college is still an impossible task. On a side note, I am 50 years old and I just finished off paying my own student loans from college. And I think this just speaks to the burden that financial loans cause on people. And I think that this program would help immensely. I think it's extremely unfair to saddle kids with loans. I think this would give underprivileged kids an opportunity to get a head start in life. And this could be life-changing for so many to have funding to start a new educational or business venture without becoming in debt for their lifetime in the process. And it will also stimulate local economy and business. So I thank you for your time and your consideration. I strongly urge you to fund baby bonds in your final legislation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Up next is Isadora Mendez. Isadora.
Hi there.
Hi, your floor is yours, 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. My name is Isadora Mendez. I'm a resident of New Haven. I'm an organizer for Unite Here Local 217, which is a union for hotel and cafeteria workers in the state of Connecticut. And I'm testifying on the governor's proposed biannual budget. And I urge the committee to include funding for CT baby bonds in your final legislation. I strongly support baby bonds because a lot of our members are on Husky, and where their kids get to be 18 or 19 years old, the parents have to make a choice about whether to support their young adults or pay their own bills. And one cafeteria worker who I know, named Isabel, recently upped her hours at her union job and took another job on the side in order to get her son, who's going to college, through financially. And so even though her son got scholarships, the cost of getting off the ground as a young adult is so high that even a good union job isn't enough to cover the costs without Isabel getting another job. And so if her son had got a baby bond, right, he'd be paying his own bills and she wouldn't have to choose between paying her own bills and helping her get her son set up for success. And so that's my testimony, and I want to thank the Appropriations Committee for the ability to testify.
Thank you very much. Thank you for testifying.
I think
Back to number 30. Garth, you're up. No? Okay. Janae Woods Weber. You're up.
Good evening. I'm Janae Woods Weber, Executive Director at the Connecticut Women's Education Legal Fund, also known as QUELF. We advocate for under-resourced, marginalized women and girls in Connecticut. And I'm here tonight to urge the Appropriations Committee to include funding for the landmark baby bonds program in your final budget legislation, because generations of discrimination and poor policy decisions have deepened wealth inequality and severely impeded the ability of families, especially Black families and other families of color, to achieve economic security. Racism and discrimination often limit a family's ability to generate wealth and then pass down wealth to their children. The average white family has 5 times the wealth of the average Latinx family and 8 times the wealth of the average Black family. Generational wealth also plays a significant role in how families continue to earn money. It is easier to earn more income when you already have some. Connecticut is one of the most unequal states in the nation, with the 5th largest wealth gap. For example, in Hartford, the median household income is only $33,841. Take a 5-minute drive down the road to West Hartford, and the median household income is $95,298. The difference in location not only affects the income generated, but also employment and education opportunities, food and grocery options, and all other kinds of community resources that are critical to long-term well-being and financial success of Connecticut residents. The Baby Bond program will help close our wealth gap by creating endowments for children who are born into poverty. Connecticut can and should fully fund this program as a critical strategy that combats existing racial inequalities that affect opportunities for families to build generational wealth in our state. Working toward eradicating extreme wealth and opportunity inequality, especially considering the ongoing generational impact of racism and white supremacy, requires that we as a state put our money to work for what we say we value. If we value our children, especially our children who are born into poverty, and especially our children of color, then we are required to pursue the highest and best use of our resources to ensure the promise of their futures. All of us, collectively as a state, will be better off if we do. So please, make a wise investment in the futures of our most impacted youngest people by fully funding baby bonds. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry Quickmeyer. She would be online. And up next is Paula Bakalina. Paula.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very, very much, Senator Ostin and the committee for allowing me to testify today. I just want to thank the committee because last year, the Appropriations Committee doubled the state's healthcare subsidy for retired teachers on a municipal plan because they were not eligible for Medicare. And we want to thank them because the committee and the legislators really helped those retired teachers in their time of need. Retired teachers on the TRB Medicare supplement plan have similar needs and have been waiting 4 years to have these needs addressed. Will you please provide the funding to restore the 1/3 subsidy? I'm sorry. Would you provide the funding to restore the 1/3 state subsidy to the full cost of the TRB Medicare supplement plan? It will simply restore the healthcare benefit that retired teachers had until 2018 when it was taken away 4 years ago. And the nearly 5,000 retired teachers on this plan will be so grateful to you for relieving this financial burden as their health necessities as they age, their health, it requires that they have a Medicare supplement plan to make sure that which really will provide protection and provide them with the protection from the privatized prior authorizations and networks, which they really have a lot of trouble dealing with as they're in their 80s and 90s. It's very difficult for them and the families. So it's so much better if they could continue to have their Medicare supplement plan, and those 5,000 really are depending on you. And in addition to that, Senator Austin, I also wear another hat. I'm a retired educator, but I also have a group that I founded several years ago called Make Voting Easy. And for the last 4 or 5 years, we have been working diligently on trying to get early voting passed. And we did do that, and with your help and with the help of all the legislators. Thank you for allowing the Connecticut residents to vote on the referendum, which was passed by 60% of the voters. And what we really need now is for you to please fully fund the early voting program. Make it so that we have a line item on like a placeholder on the governor's budget for these important financial needs. The early voting, we really would like to see happen for 2 weeks, 14 days, including weekdays and weekends, making sure we have Saturday and Sunday, early mornings from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and late in the evening from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we want to make sure we have a minimum number of polling places for each municipality based on population and access to transportation. I really also want to put a shout out and let you all know that we also are in agreement with what Stephen Lance said earlier in the funding needs for the Connecticut Voting Rights Act, so that we can preserve our democracy and every person has the opportunity to vote without fear of discrimination. In addition to that, we know that we need funding to upgrade our aging voting machines. That's it. That's my last request.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much,
Have a
and
nice
you
night.
stay safe.
You kept on going on. In addition to that, I was wondering where we were going. Amy Cunningham, are you here? John Wooten? Garth?
Garth, you don't want to testify?
Callie Heilman? Sherry Quickmeyer? Madam Administrator, is there anybody else online? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. We are done.
For tonight.
We're closing the appropriations public hearing. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.